Milton Babbitt is one of the giants of American contemporary music. Open any textbook about 20th century composers and you'll find him. He was a pioneer in the field of electronic music and an innovator in 12-tone and serial music. As a professor at Princeton University and the Juilliard School of Music, he's taught several generations of composers as varied as Donald Martino and Stephen Sondheim. Babbitt's musical beginnings in Jackson, Mississippi, however, were far removed from the world of the musical avant-garde.
I played in bands, I played college bands, I played in high school bands, I played in marching bands, I played in bands that couldn't march, that only sat still. I played in every kind of band imaginable. And above all, I played a great deal of jazz and popular music. I wrote popular songs by the carload, I did, and arranged them. That was my life, to be honest with you. My hero was Rudy Vallée. Rudy Vallée had impeccable diction and remarkable intonation, and people forget how very good he was.
Oh, fill the steins to dear old Maine, shout till the rafters ring.
That was my musical life. On the other hand, if you want to continue this discussion for a minute, I have to say this. Something else happened to me. When I was about 10 years old, I was in Philadelphia for the summer. My mother was a Philadelphian. An uncle of mine, who was a Curtis graduate and a serious musician, took me aside, knowing that I was totally involved in popular music, and asked me to listen to something he was going to play. He then played for me either he doesn't remember it, I don't remember. It was from the Schoenberg Opus 11 or the Schoenberg Opus 19. The Opus 11 is one of the first, what people unfortunately call atonal pieces. I was baffled, but I was impressed in a rather vague way because my uncle seemed to be interested in it.
Years later, as a college student in the 1930s, Babbitt embraced Schoenberg's music. He went on to use these materials in personal, intellectual, and highly structured ways.
But you say intellectual process, I cannot separate the intellectual from the so-called emotive, that old hoary chestnut bifurcation. I mean, after all, we react emotionally to things as we construe them, as we understand them. If we don't know what it is for someone to hold a gun to our temple and don't know what a gun can do, we're likely to think it's a loving gesture. We don't know that it's likely to blow our head off. We have a totally different reaction to it. So I don't know that you react to anything emotionally until you have some construal. You may misunderstand it, but the fact is you understand it in some terms. And so too with the music. Look, I don't want to minimize the extent to which some of this music may present difficulties because of a certain unfamiliarity. But it can also be very simple music. I wrote a piece for my daughter when she was just a beginning piano student, and any child can play it, and very few children do. It's a matter of the kinds of relationship between the pitches. No one would have possibly predicted the effect. I mean, you can't imagine what happened within the world, our little world of music, when Stravinsky, who had denounced 12-tone music sort of in general terms as being, mathematical, which is the usual silliness, that kind in general, after Schoenberg's death, he suddenly began writing pieces that were undoubtedly and indescribably and uniquely describable as 12-tone pieces.
And I think there are historical, artistic precedents for this. I'll revert to Beethoven. Some of the late sonatas or late string quartets, even the last symphony at the time, were regarded as the work of an absolute madman. Some of these pieces were considered unplayable.
Early on in his career, Babbitt was drawn to the possibilities of electronic music, in part because a synthesizer could produce complex musical rhythms beyond the experience or ability of most live performers.
And I talked to RCA here in Princeton about it around just before the war. And they worked and produced something called the electronic sound synthesizer at RCA. They built it inside themselves. It cost about $500,000, but they could afford it because it was in company and they had all the materials. Very secretly, they developed this synthesizer, a second one, which is an enormously sophisticated instrument, which is quite literally true that you could specify any acoustical aspect of a musical event and the mode of proceeding from that musical event to the next musical event. And of course, it was very demanding, but look, you know, the joy of walking into the studio with a piece in your head and walking out later, maybe months later, with a finished performance on the tape in your hand. Remember, the idea of the 12-tone system doesn't involve any new conceptions. It's simply a way in which you apply them compositionally. There's absolutely not a new idea there. You have the same 12 pitch classes that Bach had, there are no new physical materials. These are all the same old physical materials. You can go to the piano and there they are. But the way in which they're used compositionally is the only real difference.
I would consider that Milton Babbitt's music is what I and perhaps some of my colleagues would call maximal music. I mean, there's minimalism and there's why shouldn't there be maximalism? It's a listening experience which involves you totally.
Musical structure is in the musical mind of the beholder. And it's what you can remember. It's really in the memory of the beholder. It's what you can recall. If you forget what has been played preceding to what you're hearing at the moment, then of course you don't have musical structure. I taught at Princeton a great part of my life, and when I retired from Princeton, I teach at Juilliard. I'm among musicians all the time. It's meant to be a part of musical society which plays the smallest role in contemporary society. I mean, how many people know any contemporary music or care to hear it or go to orchestras to hear it? How many people take a score, and how many people can take a score and study it, which is what everybody used to do in the 18th, 19th century. What it's meant to me is to be part of a minority within a minority within a minority. But we love it. It's our baby.
Milton Babbitt continues to compose every day. The Boston Symphony and conductor James Levine premiere his latest work, Concerti for Orchestra, in January 2005.